Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Shadi and I do videos on lifestyle, motherhood, health and fitness, and just all those types of things. So if you like this video or any of those subjects, you can go ahead and click on that subscribe button and subscribe to my channel. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and click the bell notification just so you get notified every time I put out a new video. Okay, so this video is about my birth story with Cyrus, who's my second child, and I know, I'm so embarrassed. It's been way too long, and I should have put out this video way sooner, but honestly, it's been so crazy with two kids. I just don't even know how the time has gone by so fast. He just turned 5 months old, and I honestly don't know where the time went. But I wanted to go ahead and put out this video because I want to have this story for him to look back on, because I do have it for my daughter, so it's only fair I have it for him too. And it's also interesting to kind of compare the two stories between my firstborn and Cyrus. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the details on what happened the early morning that Cyrus was born. So on Saturday, March 2nd, I just got up and went about my day, just doing things how I normally did. If you guys have been following along with my story throughout my pregnancy, I had a very easy pregnancy, my first pregnancy and also again my second pregnancy. So I just went about my day doing my typical things, and we decided we wanted to take Mila, my daughter, to the mall. So we went to the mall, and while we were there, we figured we'd grab lunch. So we went to a restaurant called BJ's and sat down to have lunch there. And the main time that I always felt Cyrus kicking and moving was like when I actually sat down, which was, you know, when you have a toddler, you don't really sit down much to kind of like focus on yourself. So when I got to time to sit down is when I would feel him move the most. So I remember that when we sat down at lunch that day, I was feeling Cyrus kick around, and it was always a relief feeling like the movement. As crazy as it is, I did this with my first daughter too. I started watching a whole bunch of like YouTube videos on birth and things like that with my first daughter before I had ever given birth to a baby. So that kind of freaked me out the first time around. This time around, I had started watching videos again about birth, and I had come across some videos about stillbirth. So like in those like days around March 2nd, I was kind of like really concerned, and I was like, hey, let me make sure I have like these kick counts and I'm feeling him move. So when we sat down at lunch that day, I was kind of relieved. I was like, all right, I felt him move, we're good. And then we just went about our day. That night, my mom called me, and she said she wanted to come spend the night at our house, which she never does, ever. She said she wanted to come hang out with Mila and spend the night, and I was like, okay, that's totally fine, you can come spend the night. So she came to our house, and she was getting ready to spend the night, and Mila was getting ready for bed, and Castor was getting ready for bed. Everyone was getting ready for bed, and it was around 10 o'clock. Yes, I know, my toddler goes to bed really late. She puts us to sleep every night, but besides that, it was around 10 o'clock, and everyone was getting ready for bed. So everyone went to bed, laid down, and same with me. And that's usually, like I said, when I would feel Cyrus move the most, is when I get to like lay down and, you know, focus on myself. So I laid down, I was trying to do my kick counts, but I wasn't feeling him move like at all. And I didn't really think too much of it, but having had watched some videos about stillbirth like a few days prior, it was kind of like stuck on the back of my mind. So I'm laying around, I'm like, all right, I don't feel any movement still. How come I'm not feeling him move? I always feel him move when I'm laying down, like at bedtime. So I got up, I drank some water, I laid back down. I'm like, okay, maybe the cold water will get him moving. I didn't feel anything. At that time, it was probably like around 11, and everyone was asleep. My mom was asleep, Castor was asleep, and Mila was asleep. So I was starting to get a little bit concerned, but I didn't want to wake anyone up and just like I didn't want to wake Casper up and freak him out. So I kind of went and drank more water, laid around, kind of changed positions, poked at my belly, like still nothing. And I was like, goodness, like this is really starting to freak me out. So I finally decided to wake Casper up around like 1 o'clock. And I had been trying to feel these movements up until 1. So I woke up Casper and I said, you know, I don't feel him moving. I don't know if it's something like I should be like worried about. And then he's like, well, why don't we call the advice nurse or the delivery nurse. So we called and she said to have some food and then lay back down and try to count for kick counts. So I got up at like 1:15 in the morning, and I was like having a meal, which is definitely not something I typically do. So I had a meal, I laid back down, still no movement. I had some juice, still no movement. Casper brought me some, it was cranberry juice. I didn't feel any movements, and at that point, like, I was really starting to get worried. I was like poking at my stomach, and usually that would do the trick. So we got really worried, and we called in again, and the advice nurse said, you know, why don't you guys come in and we'll do like a heart rate monitor and check the baby. And as crazy as it is, my mom had decided to spend the night that night, so it kind of worked out perfectly. I went and I woke my mom up and I said, hey mom, you know, we're gonna go check on the baby, make sure the heart rate and everything's okay. Can you keep an eye on Mila? So my mom went over into Mila's room and hung out with Mila and went to sleep next to her. So when we went in, I remember it was around 2:30, and they hooked me up to the heart rate monitor. They hooked, you know, that device around my belly to see the baby's heart rate. After a while, they checked the heart rate, and they said they see the heart rate of the baby, which was a huge relief at that point. That's like all we wanted to see at that point. And something I forgot to mention is we walked in like in our pajamas. Like, we were so concerned. We didn't grab anything. We didn't grab any bags. We didn't put on clothes. Like, I went in there with my pajamas. My husband was in some shorts and a t-shirt. My hair was down, like, just went in there. As I'm laying there, they told me that they also wanted to do an ultrasound just to make sure everything's okay. So they told me to hang tight and kind of like lay there so that they can monitor the baby's heart rate for about 30 minutes. So as I was laying there, I felt my underwear get a little bit wet. And this is how I went into labor with my firstborn, Mila. Like, my water broke a little bit. It wasn't like gushing, like, like I knew that my water broke. It was just like literally a little trickle into my underwear where I wasn't sure like if it was pee or if it was amniotic fluid. So as I'm laying there in the hospital, I feel myself get a little bit wet, but it wasn't like a gush of anything, how, like, you know, how you see in the movies, or even like at home, like some women say, oh, my water broke, and, you know, it was like dripping down my leg. It was nothing like that. So I looked at my husband and I'm like, hey, Kaz, I'm not sure, but I think my water just broke. I know I didn't pee myself, but I'm a little bit wet. So when the nurse came back, I told her, I said, you know, I think my water broke. I'm not sure. So they went and they're like, let's test it. So they brought like an amniotic kit. It's like a little strip. They put a little bit of the fluid on. So they put that on and they're like, yep, that's your amniotic fluid. Your amniotic sac just tore a little bit. Then they looked at me and they're like, okay, well, you have two options. You have the choice to go home and kind of go through labor at home, or we can admit you here right now. And based off of, they're telling me, they're like, based off of your first delivery, we suggest you stay, because if you guys haven't been following my story or have seen my previous birth story with my daughter, I gave birth to my daughter in like a little over 3 hours. So it was a super fast labor, like from beginning to end. So I said, you know what? There's like no way I'm going to go home, because that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear was that I was going to give birth at home. So I said, admit me. I'm ready to like just be in the hospital. And like I said, we didn't have any hospital bags. My hair was down. I didn't have a clip, nothing. So I was like, keep me here. And I told my husband, I said, Kaz, you go get our hospital bags and I'll hang out here while they like admit me into the room. And he's like, are you sure you want me to leave? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. You can go. Like, go and come back. And another thing is, we live like 5 minutes away from the hospital. So that's why I was like, leave. Otherwise, I'd be like, no, you stay. So I said, go get our bags and come right back. So in that time, I was telling the nurse, I'm like, I don't even have a hair tie. So she took a glove and she ripped off like the wrist part, and I used that part as my hair tie for the time being. At that time, I was still hooked up to the monitor, and they're like, oh, do you feel that contraction? And I was like, no. They're like, oh, that was a big contraction. You didn't feel that? So I wasn't feeling my contractions, but apparently I was having contractions, and I guess my pain tolerance is pretty high. So by the time they moved me into my main room where I was going to deliver, I had one contraction that I actually felt, and then Castor got back. My mom and Mila were still sleeping, so they had no idea. They had no idea what's going on at this point. And Castor comes back, and it was around, I want to say, like around 3:30 that Castor came back. And I had told him, I said, hey, I felt like one contraction so far, and we're like doing good. We're breathing through it. And at that point, where it's like, soon as he came back and I like got my actual hair tie and went back, I started feeling my contractions like back to back. And that's how I was with my daughter. I had contractions back to back, and I felt like I got no break, but they were like really intense and really hard. So that's what was happening the second time around too. So at that point, I had a good amount of contractions. I can't say I really counted them, because I didn't take any medication. I didn't want epidural. I didn't want anything. And I had my daughter naturally, so I told myself, if I can do it, I'm going to have my son naturally too, or my second child. So my main goal was to deliver again without any medication, without any epidural, so a natural, unmedicated birth. So I went through all these contractions, and at, what time was it? 4:59, Cyrus was born. I did about 3 pushes and he was out. So from 3:30, which was like when I very first had like a contraction, to 4:59 is basically how long it took for me to have my baby. My daughter took me 3 hours. My son took me about like an hour and a half. So I have super fast deliveries, and they told me with my first birth that if I have another baby, I have to like be really close to the hospital around the time that I'm supposed to be due. And again, they told me if we want any more kids, like I have to be really close to the hospital, because he was born in an hour and a half. So we do want a third. We do plan on having a third. It's not like set in stone, but it always freaks me out knowing like that the time like of birth decreases so much for me. I know it's amazing, and a lot of women are like, oh, we wish we had that, but it's also really nerve-wracking. I'm very thankful for it, but it's also very nerve-wracking, because like I said, I was always worried I was going to give birth like in the car, in the house, and like have nobody around. So that's like my biggest fear with having like fast labors. So like I said, I pushed him out like with 3 pushes, and he was born at 4:59 a.m., weighing in at 6 pounds, 10 ounces, 19 and a half inches, and yeah, I think that's it. So he was smaller than Mila, my first, which I thought was interesting. I had put on roughly the same amount of weight, as crazy as it is. I know you guys are all going to hate me. A lot of women are going to hate me right now. I put on 19 pounds with my daughter, 18 pounds with Cyrus. So, or 18 pounds with my daughter and 17 pounds with Cyrus. So I know you guys are going to hate me, but I put in a lot of work throughout my pregnancy. I worked out typically every day, and I made sure I ate healthy. So if you hate me, don't hate me too much, because I didn't get to enjoy as much like snacks and treats as I'm sure a lot of women do. But that was pretty much my birth story, and as crazy as it is, I feel like the stars all aligned that night, because my mom came over unexpectedly and said she wanted to spend the night. I wasn't feeling Cyrus move, so that made us worry, and we ended up going in the hospital to get him checked out. And things just kind of like worked their way through, because if we didn't have someone to be at our house and I started feeling contractions, by the time someone came over to watch Mila, I would have probably given birth in the house. So that's the birth story for Mr. Cyrus. He's been such a joy. He's been so easy. Second babies are so much easier, in my opinion, at least in my experience, I should say. Mila was really easy too, but I feel like the first time you have a baby, like everything is so new and you're kind of caught off guard and you just don't know what to expect. So the second time around, you're just kind of, you know how it is, and you kind of go with the flow, and you're not so nervous and anxious. So it's been really nice having Cyrus and watching Mila with him. So yeah, that's my birth story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, I know my comments have been turned off, but I am on Instagram. You can always message me on Instagram or leave comments on there. My Instagram name is FitGirlGoneMom, and I'll go ahead and put that like somewhere in the video so that you can see it, or even like in the drop down menu. So you can go ahead and leave comments there. Follow me on Instagram, and I'd love to have you guys as a part of my family. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and watch out for some new videos that I'll be posting very soon. Take care. Bye.